you wanna? There we go. So I just did a rough number count, so we do have a quorum present, and I'll rely on Melanie or Kate to keep track of who's here. Thanks for all the work folks have done in between meetings. Seems like there's been some good progress, some good discussion at the subcommittee and on the email chains. I've tried to keep up with as much of it as possible. We've got a number of things to roll through today. I just want to review the agenda as written. Are there any proposed modifications or changes to the agenda as written?
This is Oliver. I have a quick question. I know that in the handout for this meeting, we're supposed to take a look at the situational assessment, but I don't see that on the agenda unless I'm blind, which is a possibility.
It's on there at 11:30, Oliver.
Oh, thank you very much.
Okay. Not hear any other proposed amendments. We'll proceed with the agenda as written. Hopefully folks got a chance to review our October meeting summary. Are there any proposed changes to the meeting summary as written? Not hearing any changes. All those in favor of adopting the meeting summary as written, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, we'll consider those adopted. Oh, we've got some space for some updates and announcements. I think the most significant one that I've got at least is that we got Tom Smith is here today, is our newly appointed task force member representing, I believe, the trust beneficiaries. And I don't know, Tom, you sent out a little bio about yourself, but if you want to say hi or do a quick intro, here's some time for you.
Yeah, I hope my bio would prevent this from having to happen, but no, I think it covers a lot of my background in that. So yeah, again, lived here in the county 35 years, spent a lot of my time wandering the hills, Lookout Mountain, Stewart Mountain, Canyon Lake area. So I'm familiar with a lot of the public land that some of these advisory recommendations would be made for. So unless anybody else has any questions about me, that'll do it for me.
Thanks, Tom. Glad to have you.
Thanks.
Any other updates from task force members?
Yeah, how do I raise my hand? I can't find it on this particular screen. I guess they updated my Zoom. But I do have an update and a question.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah, Tom, why don't you tell us about your career in the DNR and your expertise in forestry?
Okay, maybe you didn't get my email. Yeah, I was at the UW, got a degree in forest resource management in 1982. I think while I was there, I was less interested in some of the classes on forest regulation and harvesting. What I really found most exciting was forest ecology, fire ecology with Dr. Jim Agee. And another thing that has kind of really shaped my whole approach to things is one of my professors, Chad Oliver, kind of told his students, he said, you're going to get a lot of information from studies, reports, book learning, but he advised us to go out and find a piece of forest and don't just take what he said for book learning for granted, but go out and walk the woods and see if what we're learning actually makes sense out there. And that's pretty much set my tone in life. I was with the DNR for 33 years. But again, most of that time was boots on the ground in laying out timber sales and doing block plans. And when I switched over to forest practices, same thing there. A lot of time out in the ground working with timber owners, large and small, and logging outfits, and interacting with the public. I was on the Lake Whatcom Watershed Forum for a number of years, dealing with activities within the watershed. And then I switched over to fire in 2000, spent 20 years in fire, supervising crews, and spent time again in the hills around Whatcom County and other areas working with fire crews, fire investigations. So that's it. Jim, I think I've ran into you when you were working in the woods doing reforestation, and also when you're doing some CREP work in the South Fork.
Yeah.
So that's about it.
And just a quick report from my position on Planning Commission. There was an issue that came up around the importance of forest canopy in terms of open space designations. There was a 20-acre forested parcel that was turned down for open space designation because the criteria for open space value of open space come from the 90s, and intact forest canopy in its impact on climate change and absorption of water into the aquifers don't seem to have value. So I'm trying to work with county government to update their criteria for open space. So that's something that's an interconnect between our committees.
Thanks, Jen. Just one other update that I just remembered, as part of the county's comprehensive plan update, we have this new requirement to develop a climate element, and one of the sub-elements is focused on climate resilience, and been working with a consultant to compile a bunch of natural hazard and climate hazard related data, and the big one pertinent to this group is related to wildfire risk. So we actually have a meeting with the consultant, I believe, tomorrow to review some of their initial maps looking at wildfire risk. So hopefully I'll have some of that to report back to this group, or hopefully incorporate into our plan development in the near future. Any other updates from folks or consultants, staff? All right. We'll just keep rolling on to our public comment period. Just a quick refresher, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes. And we do have the opportunity for folks to submit comments online. So I guess if you are a member of the public, which I can't see on my screen, but if you would like to make a comment, please raise your hand and Kate or Melanie will let you into the room. We'll let you into the talking room. It's like Councilmember Strimler, do you have a comment?
Nope, I'm just observing today.
All right, good to have you.
You bet.
Anyone else in the waiting room, Melanie or Kate?
Nope,
Okay.
no one else.
All right, well, let's just keep on rolling. I think I'll pass it over to Melanie to review our work plan schedule and go from there.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. I'll share my screen. Give me one moment. Is that showing up for everybody?
Yep.
All right. So apologies, this looks a little bit different than the schedule in your meeting packet. I'll send this around to everybody after this meeting. I wanted to add just a little bit more detail with you all. I think it'll be helpful for you to see just a little bit more specifics in terms of what we'll be discussing and approving at each meeting. So I wanted to talk through this a little bit, and like I said, I'll circulate this around so that everybody has access to it. So here we are, we're in November, and I just wanted to briefly recap what we've been working on to date. You know, we've kicked things off and we've had a few subcommittee meetings, and we've been really focused on drafting the goals for the plan. And we've spent some time on this as it's really important. and it sets the foundation of the plan, right? Everything builds off of these goals. So I think this has been time really well spent, and we're still in process, right? But we've had, quite a few subcommittee meetings and full group meetings dedicated to this. We'd really like to approve goals at the next meeting, and I'll talk more about that later on in our meeting when we have time to discuss the goals. And then from there, we're going to move into objectives, threats, and actions. And so we've got most of the first half of 2025 is still focused on moving through this planning process. Triangle has been focused on this community values portion of the plan. And so we have conducted those assessment interviews. You'll hear the outcomes of that process today, and a summary of that was circulated around to all of you. And we've prepared a draft survey that many of you have reviewed and provided comments, and thank you for that. We'll talk about the next steps for the survey when we go through the assessment summary. The outcomes of the assessment and the survey will go into this community values report that Triangle is working on, and that will get incorporated into the plan. We have Dave Peterson is on, and Dave has been working on the background and policy, reviewing a lot of the relevant planning documents that many of you have shared, and summarizing the findings from those to draft that initial background and policy section of the plan. So looking ahead, like I said, we're going to move into objectives, threats, and actions. That's where the subcommittees will be focusing. And Dave will continue working on this background and policy section. And then once we have draft goals and draft objectives, we'll start this process where Dave will be drafting content based on that foundation that you are all forming. And we'll start that kind of cyclical review process where task force is approving and generating content, and then Dave is piecing it all together and fleshing out the plan in more detail. So I'll keep this up on the screen and see if anyone has any questions. And feel free, if you can't find the mute button, just come off mute and speak up. Not seeing any questions. Chris, any questions in the room from Corey?
No.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll stop. I
This is
think I
all. I have a quick question, and again, maybe I'm out of line, but I noticed that the definition of forest resilience is finished this month. And I'm having a hard time finding today's agenda, excuse me, but are we going to be discussing that definition, or is it a done deal?
So it's a good question, Oliver. So we had at our last meeting, had something that we felt like was a good working definition for now that this group reviewed, and I believe what we had decided was that we were going to come back to it, not at this meeting. We have a lot packed into the agenda at this meeting, and I think some of the subcommittees wanted to have further discussion, but it's a good reminder, Oliver, to make sure that we come back and revisit it. And it's possible that we might have time to do that at our next meeting.
Okay, I'll drop my question then. Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver.
So sorry, I still can't find hands up, but
That's okay, Jim.
would
Jim
that
and then Brandy, I see your hand. Go
would
ahead,
that
Jim.
include the introduction that seems to limit our work to publicly owned forests, whereas I believe we've expanded it to all forests?
Yes, I think I hear your question, Jim, and I think that might have been related to some of the wording in the survey. And it's true that the work is not limited to
Yes, the
publicly
survey,
owned.
it was a
Yeah,
survey.
yeah. And we'll talk more about the next steps for that, but just to be clear about the question for everybody and the scope of this, the work is not limited to just publicly owned forest. The idea for the community values report is that the community input and values from the public is predominantly to influence publicly owned forests. That might have created a little confusion. Does that help, Jim?
Yes.
Okay. Go ahead, Brandy.
Thank you. So just regarding the goals work that you were hoping to finalize at the next meeting, I would just ask that we get the subcommittee meeting scheduled early on so that we can do the work, so that we can give you what we're generating as revised goal statements. I don't want to have a situation where we're meeting 2 days before you're asking for a deadline. So if we could just keep that in mind, that would be helpful, I think, for all the subcommittees.
Appreciate that, Brandy. And yeah, you're right. We have a shorter time between meetings this month. It's just kind of how things shook out. And then we have the Thanksgiving holiday. So that's definitely front of mind. And we'll discuss next steps specific to subcommittee meetings and the goals later on today. So yeah, appreciate that.
And then we are going to talk about the community survey, right, today? So I can hold a question that I have about that until later on the agenda.
Yeah, Kate is going
you.
to talk about the
Okay.
situational assessment and the next steps for the survey.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brandy. All right, I'm going to stop sharing my screen and then I will pass it over to Kate.
Okay, folks, give me 1 second to pull up the report from the situational assessment.
And while you're doing that, I'll just ask folks, this wasn't included in the meeting packet just because it was so lengthy and we wanted to not send you a 40-page PDF. So just confirming that everybody received a copy of this presentation via email. And if not, I can forward it to you. Yes, Oliver. You're on mute, Oliver. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know if it's the right time right this moment to ask the question, make a statement about the situational assessment, but let me know when it's appropriate.
Sure. How about we give Kate a chance to run through the presentation and then we have time for questions.
Thank you.
Thanks, Oliver.
All right. Okay, so I'm gonna walk through the results of the assessment at a pretty high level today, just noting that we have limited time, but you all received a copy of this report along with your meeting packet, as Melanie mentioned, back on November 6th. So please do take a look in detail. So today I'd just like to give a little background context on our thinking and our goals behind the assessment. We'll walk through some of the key findings, which will ultimately inform the community values section of the final plan. And then we'll talk about more specifically the feedback we heard around the plan development and the task force process, as well as public engagement, policy recommendations for the Forest Resilience Plan. And as Melanie noted, we'll have time at the end for questions. So please be ready to ask your questions then. So just again, for context, our goal of the assessment is to collect input on core values and interests related to Whatcom County Forests and solicit feedback on the process for developing the Forest Resilience Plan. More specifically, the results of the assessment informed the survey questions to some degree that you all have now hopefully had a chance to take a look at. And then furthermore, the results of this report will be highlighted in the community values section of the ultimate plan. So again, just briefly as a reminder, these are the folks who were interviewed. I'm not gonna list them off here, but just know that you have access to this information. You all were looped into identifying folks as well. We sent invitations to more like 15 or 16 initial folks, and 11 of those chose to participate. And these names were identified by the task force. So you all, Whatcom County, as in we had input from Chris, and some context from Triangle's research as well. Again, context here, these were our guiding questions for the interviews. I'll just note that, you know, these interviews are quite informal, and our goal is to be able to key in on what the interviewees want to talk about and where their expertise lies. So these are what we use to guide conversations, but ultimately we keep it pretty informal and focus on what interviewees are most excited to talk about. Okay, so moving into our key findings. These were the overarching values and interests identified across responses and interviewees. So this is information that we pulled across question responses and across interviewees. You can see on the screen there, we clumped them into these couple of categories, which are love of the land, the forests supporting a sustainable income, forests viewed as a long-term investment for the community, as wildlife habitat, as providing recreation opportunities, and just holding really immense cultural and community significance. Oops, here we go. Okay, so a little bit more specifically, what you're seeing on the screen now are themes that were highlighted by many interviewees as key challenges to achieving forest resilience. So we heard from folks that there's a concern over fragmentation of forest land, and that leading to a challenge in management and coordination. Many folks noted the increase of recreational use in general, and that leading to possible misuse or challenges in management, just at the scale and pace that recreation is growing in Whatcom County. Kind of related to both of those items, we also heard mention of just lack of adaptive management related to challenges with forests that are vulnerable to pests, disease, and environmental stress, and an urging to be more adaptive in the future. And then, of course, many folks spoke specifically to climate change risks, specifically fire, drought, rising temperatures, all related to this need to manage more adaptively in the future. So we pulled in some quotes into this report, and I encourage you all to look specifically at those as illustrative of these themes that we've pulled out. So this particular quote here is illustrating that many interviewees with experience in the timber industry really spoke to their commitment to responsible stewardship, specifically beyond their lifetimes, and how the forests represent an investment in the future to them. So moving into kind of key findings around plan development and task force process, we asked interviewees a series of questions related specifically to how this group is, the process of this group and the ultimate development of the plan. So the next few slides just illustrate key takeaways and challenges. So this is what we heard from folks in terms of what really needed to happen to make the task force successful and ultimately bring about a successful forest resilience plan. Folks emphasized the need for diverse involvement, opportunities for public feedback, and really these two pieces identifying realistic goals for the task force, and in doing so, really clarifying the task force's role and scope to achieve those goals. Again, another kind of illustrative quote here. So engagement with environmentalists, timber interests isn't just box checking, it needs to be meaningful, speaking to that need for diverse input. These are specific recommendations for plan development. I encourage you all to read these on your own, but I did want to highlight that they are here, and these are the, this is the information that especially Melanie and myself use when we're facilitating this process. So these are the types of things that we heard from interviewees. And I'm just going to keep clipping along. This was a few challenges that folks identified to the plan development process. Speaking about, a concern for lack of coordination and expertise, just the difficulty in coordinating meetings between a large group like the task force and ultimately meeting competing interests. The challenge of public perception and engagement, again, noting that this is a large group meeting on a limited timeline. And then finally, concerns around transparency and how the plan will ultimately be implemented. And these are the same, kind of pulling from the same section of the report, which is related to specifically the task force process. Okay, so kind of the final chunk of information is really about making recommendations about how best to engage the public. So we had some of our feedback was really specific, right? We got specific groups and names of folks that interviewees recommended we talk to. Many of the people that you're seeing on this list were ultimately engaged as our second round of interviews. So that was super useful information. And then the final really series of questions that we asked interviewees about were specific to policy recommendations. And what we wanted to highlight were a couple pieces that were kind of lacking consensus among interviewees. So these are issues that folks brought up but had kind of diverging opinions on, which are the approach to forest management, so how forest management should operate in general, this kind of tension between recreation and conservation, and that leading to challenges in management and planning, a specific tension between carbon sequestration and harvest rotations, and then promoting a sustainable timber economy in an existing regulatory environment. Again, I encourage you to take a look at these quotes that are in the report, which just illustrate some of the themes I just covered. And finally, based on kind of those issues lacking consensus, these were sort of the strategies that many of our interviewees identified as ways to combat those issues. This is, of course, not comprehensive to all strategies to combat those issues, but we made notes of, potential solutions here, which a few of which include promoting longer harvest rotations, implementing financial incentives, and promoting sustainable forest practices. So I think with that, and given our time today, I'm gonna jump to the end here and ask if we have any questions. And Oliver, I know you had your hand raised first, so I'll let you come off mute.
Okay, thank you very much. First of all, I did read the situational assessment, and I have great respect for the people involved and that process. However, I do see a misser in that process, and that's no direct acknowledgement that how we manage forests has an influence on the hydrograph, which relates to water supply. And I'm much, and again, we can't go back and redo that process, but I want to make sure that this task force understands that there is an influence of forest management on the hydrograph and water supply, and that, in my opinion, needs to be one of the major topics in our forest resilience plan, assuming that the plan is not going to only focus on the effect of climate change on forestry, but also acknowledging that how we manage our forests in the face of climate change has a big impact on the hydrograph and water supply. The other comment I have is on the rotation age. Of course, everybody's heard me be an advocate for retaining mature and old growth forests in terms of their function on water supply, late summer, early fall. But in regard to the rotation age, it's really about 70 or 80 years of regeneration when the rate of evapotranspiration starts to decrease. And really, a rotation age of, say, 70 years is still too, if we're interested in managing our forests for water supply late in the summer and early fall, then we need to consider rotation ages much longer than 70 or 80 years. And of course, the 70 years plus suggests that, but I want to make it clear that if you look at the early work down in Oregon on the effect of forest harvest on the watershed and water supply related to evapotranspiration rates, those rates start decreasing at about 80 years. And so that particular action of longer rotation ages would need to be much longer than 7 or 80 years to benefit from that tool. Given that, thank you very much, and I will hopefully be quiet.
Thank you for sharing, Oliver. Jim, I see your hand.
Quickly, is everything that Oliver has imparted on us also impacts mitigating flooding impacts, which is a very serious topic in Whatcom County.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jim. Other questions related to the assessment before we talk about the next steps for the survey? Okay, Brandy, I'm seeing your hand.
Thank you. So if we see omissions, like as Oliver has pointed out, what is the process for us? Is it just through the plan development that we would address those omissions, or is there some other thing that we should be thinking about in terms of rounding out what this content that you're going to be integrating into the plan, like as an appendix or whatever it's going to be?
Yeah, that's a really good question, Brandy, and I can speak to that. Mel, jump in if you have anything to add. I think you're spot on, right? This is a report of the findings that we heard from a select group of folks, with the goal that we were looking for input beyond the scope of this group, right? The task force, which are more primarily involved in the development of the plan. I'm hearing that there's definitely some areas of focus that were not highlighted by the interviewees. And I'm glad that we're talking about them so that they can inform the plan development. So I think you're right, Brandy, with your line of thinking. I would also add that those types of gaps, when we think about the community survey, if there are questions that you think would be valuable to solicit input on gaps that maybe you're finding in the assessment, that's input that's really useful for Melanie and I. Yeah, go ahead.
A follow-up question then. So some of us gave you some responses, some feedback on the survey. Will we be talking about how that input has been integrated into your new version of the survey so that we can see whether or not some of the things that were coming up for us as gaps or whatever, or yeah, okay, great, thank you.
Yes,
I can hold
exactly.
until we get into that detail. I do want to say that I do think that stormwater management, water management is really missing from that report. And I do think that part of the role of forests in terms of ecosystem functions and values is this sort of like water budget, water management, flood attenuation, et cetera role. And I think it needs to be there as part of, and I think this group thinks that as well. And so we'll all work together to try to get that content into the plan is what I'm hearing.
Thanks, Brandy. Okay. Before I give a little update on the survey, any last thoughts on the assessment? Okay. So thank you all for providing your comments on our draft community survey. We really appreciate your input, your expertise, especially, you know, this conversation's illustrating the expertise of this group. That's super valuable as we develop that survey. So next steps is that we will be compiling the edits that we received from you all to incorporate into the survey. From the input that we received, there was really nothing that we felt like couldn't be incorporated in a pretty straightforward way. So we feel confident in incorporating those thoughts into a revised edition of the community survey. Our goal is to launch the survey by the end of next week. The survey will be shared on the county's website. That'll be kind of its home hosting location. And from there, we are going to be working with Whatcom County, so with Kirsten and Chris, to share with their networks, you know, the existing communication networks that the county has. We'd also ask that as you all have time and you feel it's appropriate, that you all share the survey with your networks, knowing that you all have vast networks of your own, and we can absolutely, you know, share some materials to make that easy for you, including the link and even some language that you can just like quickly drop into an email or however you feel that's appropriate. So once the survey is launched, ideally by the end of next week, our intention is to have it open until the end of the year. So that means that even if it's launched next week, we're not asking you all to, you know, immediately share with all of your networks. We know we've got the holidays coming up and all that kind of good stuff. So just as you're able, that's kind of our ask of you for next steps on the survey. Melanie, is there anything else that I'm missing?
No, I think that sounds great. I want to circle back and have a more clear response to your question, Brandy, about incorporating the edits. We feel like the edits that most of you provided were really clear, you know, what your suggestions were for word rephrasing or adding in additional options and things like that. What I would propose is that if, as those edits are incorporated, if we need to reach out to any one of you individually to make sure that we've captured your edit appropriately, that we could do that over the next week or so to get things finalized. And that way we can make sure that we've addressed any more nuanced comments rather than circulating the survey around again for another round of full review. So that's what I would propose, and I want to see if that works for all of you. And Brandy, I guess you specifically, since you that might be something that you're interested in.
Yeah, I think, can I speak? Is that all right?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I think that sounds fine, what you said, with the caveat that I think it's important to bring the final product, the final product that you intend to launch back to the group for the group to look at it one more time and tell you if something's not hitting the mark. I think that, you know, that's what I think. And I think that's just good process in engaging with the task force. I think it's going to help people really dial into whether or not all their concerns are addressed, and it's just going to make the product stronger. So if it means taking a couple of extra days before we launch in order to do that, I think we should do that.
That's totally fair, Brandy, and I appreciate that suggestion, and I think it's a good one. So my request then would be that we get a pretty quick turnaround response from folks before the holiday so that we don't have to push the deadline out too far beyond that. Just, you know, I think there's a balance, right, between effective review cycles and meeting deadlines. And so I'm trying to strike that, but I hear your point and I appreciate it. So I think the request then would be, Kate, if we can, just to get things a little locked down and in this moment, if we can, before we upload it into our SurveyMonkey platform, send out the Word document one more time next week, maybe mid next week, and ask for folks to prioritize a couple day turnaround in your review at the end of next week. So say the new deadline for task force kind of sign off on the updated language would be next Friday. And then we work on getting things uploaded and launched when we can the following week. So first, does that work for task force members? I'm seeing some thumbs up. Okay. All right. Kate, will that work for our internal process? Okay.
Sounds good.
All right. Thank you all. And thanks for, as Kate said, really, really thoughtful feedback that we really appreciated. It was really great feedback, and I can tell you really put some thought into it.
Okay. Any other last thoughts on the survey? Okay. I think I can turn it back to you, Melanie.
Sounds good. Well, we have some time now to talk about the goals that you all have been working really hard in your subcommittees on drafting. And we have about 40 minutes to discuss these draft goals. And what I'd like to do is have, as we did at the last meeting, have leads from the subcommittees share the goals that you came up with. These were all circulated around to everybody on Tuesday. I sent an email, so I don't think we need to spend a lot of time, reading through them. This is really a chance for subcommittees to highlight any nuance, provide additional context, maybe some questions that the group has been grappling with as they've developed these. So anything for the benefit of the full group to help them understand any additional details related to the draft goals that your subcommittee has come up with. If it's helpful at any point for Kate to share screen with the draft goals, we can do that. So just speak up and ask either subcommittee leads or any task force members that don't have them handy in front of them. So I just switched up the order a little bit from last week, and I thought we would start with forest industry and economics. And I think, Brandy, you are the one who's going to talk through those goals. Does that sound right?
Yeah, I'm sort of been labeled the de facto lead, although there are other people on that group that are lead than me. So I will, for this topic, I'll do my best, and I'll ask for the other committee members to weigh in. And I'm looking through the document that you distributed right now, trying to find the section that is forest industry. Here it is. Okay. So Beg your
Sorry to
pardon?
jump in, Brent. Would it be possible to put that up on the screen? I know we don't have it in front of us here. in
Am
the
I able to share screen?
If you would like to, Brandy, we're also happy to. What would be easiest for you?
Here we go.
Okay.
Got it. Just give me a second here. I always have a problem with Zoom's share screen bar getting in the way of my controls. Okay, Forrest, this is the section of the document that was distributed by Triangle that has the forest industry and economics. I need to stop sharing for just a second. Give me a second here, you guys. Bear with me. My controls are not available for me to use. I have to adjust a couple of things here. Okay, there you are. Okay, I'm moving things around so I can actually see all of my document. Okay, I know you can see my desktop, right?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Yeah, so just bear in mind that we pressed ahead a little bit in that we tried to, I want to actually just describe our process. Our process was to take the goal statements that were provided by Triangle, cross-reference that with the overall goal statement list that was generated back in August, ask whether or not there was anything from that list that we needed to pull through to our list of goal statements for this subcommittee, and then look for any gaps and fill those gaps with goal statements. But we had a lot of content that we were dealing with, and we decided to make some decisions about some of that content that we felt like intersected with the purpose that we had set for ourselves on the forest industry and economics subcommittee. And we ended up saying, well, these aren't really goal statements. Some of them are objective statements in our interpretation of what's the difference between a goal and an objective. So the content here is organized around not just goals, but objectives as well. You get a little bit, value added from the committee. But the main goals were to sustain a thriving timber. One main goal would be to sustain a thriving timber industry and gain those associated economic benefits for the community. There's a whole bunch of goals. Reasonable people can disagree about whether or not those are good goal statements, and they should be aligned here. We'll get to them another time. Another goal was that we would provide for that we would be providing for robust recreational opportunities over time, that would be sustained, and that we would examine county policies, programs, organizational structures, and staff capacity that could lead to the above, so as to provide recommendations for changes that would then continue to support the timber economy and recreational opportunities. There's also a focus here on managing sustainably for ecosystem functions and values, and not just timber, not just forest products. And so, this might need a little bit of work, but that's where we're going with that goal statement. And then also that the timber industry is set up to thrive, but also to deliver, and to deliver economic benefits as well as these social and ecological benefits. So you can kind of see where we're going in that. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for a minute. That we're really in the space of saying, what are the economic underpinnings that we want to maintain through a forest system in Whatcom County, and how are we going to do that for some multiple benefits, not just timber production, but for recreation and for social and human health and well-being. Okay, some of that stuff is going to get picked up in some of the other committees as well. And if there's anyone on the committee that wants to fill in the blanks there, please jump in.
Thanks so much, Brandy. Really helpful. Yeah, go ahead, Ellen.
I just had a question, and maybe you're going to address this then as you delve into your objectives. But I noticed there was a Forest Advisory Committee economic study. Can that be shared with the whole task force? And I know it was shared with the subcommittee, because I'm really interested in issues like what are the main sawmills that we're supporting in Whatcom County, and not just in Whatcom County, but outside of Whatcom County, and issues like how much is the timber being exported? I know we're as a state, the second highest timber producer in the United States. So are we exporting 90% of that lumber then to other states or to exporting to foreign countries? That kind of information is interesting, I think, and kind of gives a background on the underlying economics that we're trying to sustain. Is that planned, that kind of a discussion, or not?
Taking notes. We'll deal with it.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Thanks, Alan. Thanks, Brandy. Any other questions for Brandy or any additional input from the Forest Industry and Economics Subcommittee?
I just have a question. Who is on that committee currently?
Good question.
Yeah, I have it.
remember everybody's name. I can get there pretty quickly here. Just give me a sec, I think, to the list. And if somebody else has it before I get to it, please share it.
I'm working on it too, Brandy. We'll see who gets there first.
It includes Steve Harrell, Oliver Graw, Corey McDonald. Am I in the right subcommittee? Yeah. Ellen, you're on that subcommittee also. Barry Winger, Frank Bob. I'm going off of a routing list that may not be complete, and Chris. Chris is on the subcommittee as well. Chris Elder. Carl Weimer is missing as well.
That's right.
I think that's the climate informed forest.
I must
Yeah.
have the wrong one then. Thank
That
you.
I
is
So
think
Tracy,
this one is Tracy, Trevor, Oliver,
Chris, Carl, and Brandy.
and Carl and Brandy. Yep.
And that's Chris Elder or Chris Hankey?
Elder.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
If you're wondering why I was so confused, is because I'm actually kind of like parachuting into all the subcommittees. So I'm having a hard time keeping who's on what subcommittee straight. So
We appreciate your involvement.
Yes, definitely, Brandy. Thank you for doing that. All right, let's move on to the Stewardship and Land Use Committee. And I think Jen isn't with us today. Is there someone from that committee who volunteered to present in place of Jen?
yeah, she volunteered me.
Okay, Brandy, take it away.
Okay, yeah. Okay, so I'll share my screen again. So for the Stewardship and Land Use Subcommittee, we're really focused on stewardship practices as well as land use practices across the board. So we're not just focused on commercial land. We're not just focused on public land. We're focused on small acreage private lands as well. And so the goals that we have identified so far are to improve forest resilience. And we did the same thing where we've got some objective statements. We went through the same process that I described for the Forest Industry and Economics Subcommittee. So we started trying to plug stuff in where we thought it fit best. And so one large overarching goal is to improve forest resilience through active forest land stewardship, to retain and increase forest and tree canopy cover, and to it looks like what happened is just, I'm a little confused by this because we had a bunch of PBRS stuff under that last goal, and it looks like it's been pulled out to be its own goal statement. So that's fine. We just saw it as a mechanism to increase and retain forest canopy cover. So basically we're looking at cracking open PBRS to add some new categories to promote more participation in the program and thereby see some additional acreage in some sort of like, conservation protected status. And so these next three goals really are about some details there that we can unpack in a different conversation, I think. And then also there's a goal statement that we pulled from the the August 8th work, the August meeting work that we did, and that's this maximizing forest benefits. So that's a really truncated version of a goal statement that somebody else put forward, and we've parsed out a whole bunch of activities under that, objective-based activities that we think need to happen in order to maximize forest benefits, such as like promoting, you know, good management, encouraging value-added enterprises, et cetera. So when you go through this, just let us know if you're seeing anything that is you know, like not resonating for you or that's missing the mark. And then the other one is to coordinate with local, federal, and tribal governments and other stakeholders to align and implement forest management and resilience strategies. So part of land use, part of stewardship is about collaboration across setting a big table, having a lot of people belly up to the table, and being able to cross over all of our respective strategies and align them. I think that the alignment piece is what you should really be understanding here, is that we've got a lot of people working in this space and we need some alignment and we need to scale up. And that's what we're trying to get at with this goal here. And I think that's the end of these goals. And a lot more can be understood about these goal statements by reading those objective statements that are listed underneath, and we don't have time to go through them. So I would just encourage people to take a look at those objective statements to get a better idea of where we're going with these goal statements.
Thanks so much, Brandy. That's a great summary. Any questions for Brandy or the Stewardship and Land Use Committee? All right. Let's move on to Forest Management Coordination. And Russ, I believe that's you.
Yeah. So what we've done, and actually, Brandy, would you be able to put up our latest purpose statement while I'm getting started here? We've discussed the goal statements, but we haven't come to any conclusion with those. So what we've done, sort of as an interim, is a draft a purpose statement, and pretty soon Brandy will have that up.
I'm trying. Give me a second here. Okay, I think I have it. I think I'm working off of my hard drive and not off of our shared Google Drive, so I hope that this is the most current version. This bigger so that people can see. Is this the one you're looking for?
Yeah, I think that's probably the first of the two before you added a first paragraph.
Okay, give me a minute to go to the Google Drive and I'll pull it off of the Google Drive.
So basically, so we're taking an approach where we're working from trying to understand what various landowners and managers are, what their objectives and methods in preparation for the future are, so that we can inform
wrong one.
our
Sorry.
own coordination.
This
Okay,
is
now
I apologize.
I think I've got
We'll
it,
get it pretty
Brandy. Let
quick.
me,
Thank you.
let
You
me,
do it.
yeah.
I'm going to turn off my volume too. You don't need to listen to me struggle.
Does this look right, Russ?
Yeah, I think that there you've got the first paragraph and then the remainder. Good. So we're going through a process of talking with various landowner and manager groups, and in order to come up with a summary of those current practices and readiness for climate change. And then, so that will be both for forestry and forest resilience as well as wildfire response. So wildfire response would be both with landowners whose land is subject to wildfire and the wildfire response agencies.
Thanks, Russ.
Any questions on that?
All right. I'll stop sharing my screen. I can pull it up again for the next group if that's helpful. And I believe that is Ellen. Are you presenting for climate informed forest management?
Reading here. Okay, yeah, can I share my screen? Just, I have,
Yeah.
okay. I promise I'm not gonna read through it. Whoops, maybe it won't allow me to.
Oh, I thought I gave everyone permission, but let me double check.
Okay.
Try now, Ellen.
Okay. Looks like it's, no, to share your, allow Zoom Workplace to share my screen. Okay. Sorry.
No problem.
Okay. Okay. Never mind. It's gonna make me quit. Go ahead and.
You
put
want
it
me
up.
to pull it up? Okay.
Yeah, pull it up. The problem is I didn't have, I don't know if the purpose is on, or the revised definition of a resilient forest is on there.
Mm.
Uh.
Let me just see. Are you at the very top? There we go.
Right. No, it's not there. Okay. Well, we did do a revised definition of the forest resilience. And I think it reads a little bit better. And thanks to Steve's background in teaching sustainable forestry, he really added a lot to this. Our task force came up with 4 primary goals. The first one is identify the distribution and abundances of Whatcom County forest successional stages by vegetation type required to meet the different roles relative to the future range variability. And there's some objectives that we've added under that. The second one is to ensure future healthy and climate resilient forests in Whatcom County by incorporating science-based practices that enhance ecosystem services. So again, this is addressing a lot of the issues that others may be touching on also. Going down to the third one, if we can move the screen, enhance the contribution of forest to watershed level ecological resilience. And as Oliver was talking about initially, is that we really need to focus, somebody needs to focus on the impact of forests on watershed management. And so we have a detailed objective, I'm sorry, goal and objectives under that category also. And then the fourth one is develop guidelines for county staff to manage county-owned forest lands for resilience against anticipated disturbances, including rising temperatures, lower summertime rainfall, increased flood frequency and severity, increased mass wasting events, wildfires, and insect outbreaks. And I think, yeah, okay. And so that's the 4 we have and our objectives. So I will try to answer questions, but some of the other folks on the committee that help draft specific objectives may want to pipe in also if there's a specific question.
Any questions? Any comments? All right. Well, I'll stop sharing my screen. I can pull it back up if something comes up or if somebody wants to highlight anything. Oh, go ahead, Russ.
Yeah, I think for climate informed forestry, I think I mentioned before that I serve on the state carbon and forest management work group, and we should have at least a draft model of 8 different forest management scenarios with climate change over the next 100 years for all DNR managed lands in Western Washington, including Whatcom County. So I think that'll be helpful in your committee's work on and as soon as it gets a point where the draft is released to the public, I'll get it to you.
Okay, thank you.
Oliver?
Yeah, just to supplement what Russ just said, that I want to bring it to the committee's attention that through grants through the Nooksack Indian Tribe, when I was there, we contracted Western Washington University, University of Washington, and Natural Systems Design to model the effect of climate change on the Nooksack River Basin. And so all of that information has been available now for over 5 years. And so that would certainly supplement any of the modeling that DNR would do in regard to the effect of climate change on the hydrograph and watershed services.
Thanks, Oliver. Any other questions or comments related to any of the information that anyone shared? Yes, Councilmember Stremler.
Yeah, thanks. I know I'm not on the committee, so is it okay if I ask a question?
I think that's okay. Is that okay, Chris?
Yep, go for it.
Okay, thank you. So Ellen Murphy just made a reference to using science-based information. And when I think about that process, I would kind of equate it to, let's say you had some kind of a medical issue and you go and look for information, science-based, and you can kind of find whatever you're looking for because there's so much out there. So I guess my question is, when it comes to, using science-based information for forestry, where is that going to be found, and what's the process of, I guess, choosing the science-based information?
Okay, first of all, there are a lot of peer-reviewed publications on science-based information. They don't all apply to our ecosystem, our climate right here in Whatcom County. There is an effort by DNR. They have what do they call it? Their orchard, where they're planting different species in different areas around the state and DNR lands, so they can see what seed type of seedlings may be doing the best in that specific environment. Let's see, and then just as who was it? Russell was saying, there's some work that has already been done on future climate expectations, where they've modeled future rates of rainfall and things, and heat and so forth, and changes in seasonal temperatures, and how we can equate that to, I'm sure there are people already equating that to specific types of species that will do best in our forests. So that's kind of some. If other people on the subcommittee want to add to that, I'm just talking off the top of my head.
Thanks, Ellen. We got one comment in the room with Corey here.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Ellen, I appreciate everything you said there, and I think to Councilmember Stremler's comment, I think that's a really important thing, is that maybe in the objective or somewhere in this final result is that we specify what minimum, what we're going to use, how we're going to qualify that. It's one of the the points that I've been trying to raise is sort of, that we ensure that research that we're using is peer reviewed, that it's applicable, that there's some level of understanding of how it would actually apply in Whatcom County, under whatever rule we're comparing it to. I liked some of what I saw in a previous committee where they were looking at kind of the baseline of what is currently occurring. And then if we're going to make recommendations, ensure that the peer reviewed science that we're looking at, how and if it actually applies here in Whatcom County, and how to do that. So I think that would be a good recommendation to kind of hash out what we would consider acceptable to be, whatever the term you used for, best science, I guess.
Well, I do think the best science, when you consider the rotation ages, even 35 years of trees, but up to 70 or 80 years, we have to really look to the future conditions when we're planting now. So it's a combination of both current conditions and future conditions on their survival rates.
Absolutely, and so just look, I guess when I was talking about current conditions is let's look at, what are current conditions, what are currently being done, and then when we're making recommendations on future conditions, that science is hopefully based in something that's peer reviewed and applicable, right? Definitely, you can point to papers that are from different geographic regions under a different set of, say, forest practice rules or forest practice, just practices in general that may or may not be comparable to the baseline here. And so we need to be careful and ensure that they make sense, so that what we're recommending is actually going to have a better outcome than what we have the outcome we're hoping that it might have.
Absolutely, and that is always a concern on the area you're looking at. And I think we do need to rely quite a bit on the climate impacts group at the University of Washington that's done so much modeling on future conditions in different areas of Washington State. So Oliver, I guess maybe you can add to that. You're muted. Oliver, you're muted.
Oliver, I'll prompt again.
Yeah,
There we go.
I'm using an iPad and it's not. Yeah, I just want to just insert that foundational science for assessing climate change and developing, vulnerability assessments, adaptation plans aren't specifically in our area, but that science still applies to our area from a foundational standpoint. And that's kind of what we did at the Nooksack Indian Tribe, and are still doing, as I understand it, is we took the foundational science from Western Oregon, even though that's not the exact ecosystem situation up here, and took that foundational science and converted it into a hypothesis that forestry has an effect on late summer stream flow and fall stream flow, and then tested that hypothesis with contemporary hydrologic modeling to transform that foundational science to specifically our watershed. And that work has, for a large part, been completed with refinement and then scaling up to other watersheds as well. So my point is that even if foundational science hasn't been done in our specific area, it's still relevant because there's no other foundational science available in our area. And so it's still relevant, in my opinion, if it comes from a slightly different area.
I would just say that it may be relevant, and that's the key. We need to ensure that it is actually relevant. In not all cases is it. And so we just need to be careful of the leaps that we're taking, in looking at that and just be objective about it and recognize that whether it's reasonable to apply it or not.
Hopefully this is where we can lean on Dave a little bit, do some review and consideration of, yeah, there we go. What's the best data?
Yeah. That's great. Great discussion, and thank you, Councilmember Strumler, for the question leading to it. If it's all right with everyone, I'm going to move us on. We have a little less than 15 minutes left together, and I want to talk about next steps. Is that all right to move forward? Okay. So I just want to highlight this sharing of information across subcommittees and continuing that dialogue with the full group is really, really helpful. And that's the way we were hoping that these meetings could flow. So I just want to highlight that and encourage that to continue both in these meetings and outside of meetings, is to continue sharing information and relevant resources. And I know a lot of things are coming out soon. And so helping to track those and making sure they get into the right subcommittee hands is really helpful. So thank you all for continuing to do that. These goals are really excellent, and I feel like each subcommittee has done a lot of really great work putting deep thought and consideration into the relevant goals related to both your subcommittee's area of focus, and also I can see some reflection back to the code, right, and the directive for this task force. So I really appreciate that and wanted to highlight that. This is really challenging, is to step back and think about what the goal is. And I see many of you already found that and have drafted objectives, and sometimes even, statements that read more like actions. And that's great, because that just helps us when we get to that stage, we'll already be ahead of the game. What I would like to propose in terms of next steps, thinking about the goal of approving goals at our next meeting, which is December 9th. I would like to ask that we Triangle look through this document with all of the draft goals and reach out to the subcommittees with some of our ideas and recommendations for some of those goal statements that could use a little bit more refining to get to the big picture goal. As opposed to maybe some of them that read more like objectives and actions. And we would just note what those are, maybe add some suggestions, and ask that you and your subcommittees focus on those in your next subcommittee meeting prior to our meeting on December 9th. I'll pause there and then talk more specifics about scheduling and our next meeting on the 9th. But any questions on that proposal for Triangle to do a little bit of work identifying some statements that might need some more work and sending those to subcommittees? Yes, Oliver. And I'll give you a minute, Oliver, since I know you're on your iPad.
Okay, I think I'm unmuted now.
We can hear you.
For some reason, bar across the top is unstable. Any case, I'm curious as what your process is going to be to review and meld these goals together. And then when will you be sending those out to committees to discuss and make recommendations prior to that next meeting?
So I'll talk through my whole proposal first, since that might be helpful. So what I would like to do is send our suggestions for goals that could use a little bit of refinement by subcommittees, send that to you all next week, early next week, and ask that you spend some time with your subcommittees focused on those goal statements. If the subcommittees can meet and discuss and share your updated goal statements with Triangle by December 5th. That will allow us a little bit of time to prep before our full group meeting on December 9th to then discuss an updated list of draft goals as a group. My proposal for December 9th would be that we have this be the only thing on the agenda, that we extend the meeting to 2 hours, and that we consider meeting in person for those that are able. Chris is, as usual, would be present in person. Kate and myself are able to be there in person. And I think this will help us just, talk through these things. We can use, in-person resources that we don't have when we're meeting virtually. And I think it will help us reach that goal of approving our goals by that date. I know we have some people who had to leave early and some people who aren't able to join this meeting that we would need to follow up with, but I wanted to see with the folks in the room how this is landing.
Can I ask a clarifying question?
Yes, Brandy.
So you're talking about getting something, you finishing something for an agenda packet on the 9th for a meeting on the 12th of December, is that right?
No, our meeting next month is on the 9th. So I would
On the
ask that subcommittees share your updated goals by the 5th. Which is the Thursday before. It's a really tight turnaround, but I just know with Thanksgiving, it's going to be really challenging for you all to meet prior.
Doesn't it depend on how many goals you're asking us to update?
I hope that by just taking the discussion out of the objectives, during that meeting and really focusing on those statements, if you can use your hour or so together to really focus in on that one statement instead of thinking of, the objective statements and maybe some of the other questions like purpose that have been topics of discussion during those subcommittee meetings, you'd be able to refine. I think between some subcommittees have 4 draft goals, some have up to 7. I don't think there's any more than that. So I hope that, and not all of them would need to be revised. Does it sound possible?
Yes.
I think it's possible. This is going to depend on when the subcommittees can meet. That's really what
Right.
it comes down to.
So let's talk about that. I would ask that, if at all possible, the subcommittees try to meet next week before the holiday. And so that would mean, Chris, I know you've been sending out doodle polls to the group. Do you think that you could do that by the end of the day tomorrow?
I believe I can.
All right. If everyone is able to, if subcommittees are able to meet next week, that would mean that we, Triangle, will do the work of identifying the goal statements that we would propose that you focus your attention on and send that to you all by Monday. Assuming that, no subcommittees will be meeting until probably Tuesday, but Monday at the earliest. Any questions or concerns about this? I know it's a tight timeline. I'm really hoping that we can leave that meeting on December 9th with approved goals, and I think this is the path to getting there. I want to ask, how do folks feel about extending the meeting to 2 hours, adding an extra half hour? So that would mean on December 9th, we are meeting from 11:30 or 11 to 1, 11 a.m. to 1 p.m. Thumbs up? Yeah, okay. How do folks feel about meeting in person? Is that of interest to anyone on the call?
Me and Corey will be there.
Okay. Brandy,
It's,
Jim, Ellen?
it's possible, but not likely
Okay,
because of everything that I have before and after that window of time.
sure.
Yeah.
Understood.
Yeah, I probably couldn't either, just because of circumstances right now, so.
Okay.
You'll just need to make sure that, you know, you've got good audio in the room if a
Yeah.
lot, if, yeah, and
Yep.
stuff. And yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll take that to a poll via email and we'll see if, based on the numbers, if it makes sense. But we'll certainly accommodate in-person and virtual, both in-person and virtual attendees as we've been doing either way. But thank you for that feedback. That's really helpful. I know that leaves us 2 minutes left. Kate, are you able to wrap us up with at least just a brief reminder of our next meeting, which we've talked about at length, so maybe we don't need to spend time on that, but we can talk about meetings into 2025.
The trash man is outside, so my dog will inevitably be adding to the conversation. Okay, yes, so meetings into 2025. I sent out a poll a couple weeks ago following our last task force meeting. And it turns out that this is still the best time for folks. I acknowledge that it
Sorry, Kate,
may
Monday.
Oh,
Because today's Thursday.
yes, sorry, today is weird. Monday from 11 to 12:30 is when we will continue to meet. And that is the second Monday of the month.
Thanks, Brandy. I see your comment in the chat and I agree. Yeah, the first half of the week sounds like it will probably work for folks as well, I suspect.
Okay. And then the only other action item is, of course, we discussed the path forward for the survey. So you all will get a revised edition of the community survey early next week. And our ask is that you review that and provide feedback no later than Friday so that we can keep pushing ahead. So thanks for your work on that. Okay.
Thanks, Kate. Any final thoughts or questions? Yes, Brandy.
Just one final question, like we have been sending you guys other like, you know, content and we're assuming, right, that you are getting it, you're doing something with it. Eventually we'll be able to close the loop on that input also, like plan structure and that sort of thing that we've been sharing with you. It's really just wanting to make sure that I don't have to worry that I have to keep bird dogging it, that it's going to come up at some point for us to revisit.
Yeah, thanks, Brandy. Do you mean other relevant documents or just overall comments in general, or both?
Yeah, like there's been a couple of things that we've been asked to do and we haven't really touched on them yet. And I understand why, because these agendas have been packed with what they've been packed with. I just want to make sure that these things that, like when we were asked to comment on the plan outline, that's gone somewhere and something's happening with it.
Yeah, this gets back to the work that Dave is doing. And so for the most part, things related to the outline to other relevant documents are sent to Dave for incorporation into the outline or the background and policy sections. And then once we get into more consistent review cycles, that's when opportunities to revisit that will be.
Thanks.
Thank you, Brandy. All right, Chris, I'll pass it off to you to adjourn us.
All right, thanks everyone for all the good discussion. 2 minutes over. Go ahead and adjourn us for the day and we'll be in touch soon. Thanks, Melanie and Kate and Dave and everyone for your time.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you all. It's great to see you.
Likewise.